testing your front-end development for Project 3. So yeah. So first off, what is Cypress? Straight from the Cypress IO site, it says Cypress is a next-generation front-end testing tool built for the modern web. We address the key pain points developers and QAs engineers face when testing modern applications. Yeah, so testing is one of those things that can be really tedious and can be really annoying, especially if you're just like, I want to develop and create new things. Why do I have to test and slow down the whole procedure? But Cypress is trying to eliminate those pain points. So it's a front-end testing framework that helps you set up tests, write tests, run tests, and debug. It's a lot of Cypress is brought about by TDD, which TDD is test-driven development. The idea behind TDD is that you're going to have short repetitive cycles where you create tests based on requirements. So say your manager comes and says, hey, I want you to create this new feature. Here are the requirements for it. The first thing that you do is you would create test cases for that. You'd create based on edge cases or just basic functionality that you want this feature to have. You write code based on that requirement, on the requirements that will pass the test cases. And so while you're writing things, you can test along the way so that you don't get to the very end and have to go back and start writing all your tests again based on your code. This can end up actually being poor development because you write your tests in order to pass the code that you've already written, rather than writing your code to pass the tests that are for sure what you need. So basically, writing the test first and then the code, or doing it simultaneously. So tests that Cypress are used for, the first one is unit testing. This is testing individual units of code one at a time. These units are usually modules, functions, or procedures, and they ensure that each unit of code is working properly by itself. So this means that we're passing in parameters into a certain function and where we know what the return value should be, and testing to make sure that happens. Integration testing is testing how different functions, modules, procedures interact with each other. So we're going to take maybe a function that calls another function and make sure that they're both returning the correct thing as expected and as desired. End-to-end testing is testing the application from start to finish to ensure that the flow of the application is working correctly. So you do some testing based on how the user might input something and how it should be done on the web application from start to finish. So I'm going to get into a demo to show how Cypress can be a great tool for doing all these kinds of tests. From Project 2 into this new folder called Project 3, so now we should be good to actually do some of this stuff. So what I'm going to show you first we got to npm init this folder. It doesn't really matter what we name anything. It's just so that we can use npm to install Cypress here. So now we can actually install it. We're going to add save dev. Now the reason we're doing this is because we don't want to run Cypress in production. We just want it to be for our development. So that's useful to have there, that flag. So now we should see that we have a package JSON, and for convenience we're going to add Cypress open Cypress open. This is just for convenience for when we want to actually call it. So now let's npm run Cypress open. Okay, so this is actually running Cypress, and it's going to get everything all set up here in this folder for us. So you can see this window pops up, and it gives us a whole bunch of examples for integration testing. We don't really care about those right now. We can also see that over here we have a new Cypress folder. We have a Cypress JSON. Now, before we go further, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to be running this app locally in order to do the Cypress testing. So I use an extension called Live Server to do this, and you can do it whatever way you want. This works since we're just doing JavaScript, HTML, CSS in this one. You can install this, and then you get this Go Live at the bottom. What Go Live does is it will serve up your page to whatever port you give it, and so in my case it's port 550 or 5500, excuse me. So what I'm going to do here is go into my cypress.json and say base URL, and then just have it go to http, not s, localhost 5500. So what this is doing is just saying, hey, our root is going to be at this place. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now let's actually get this live server up and running. So I'm going to say go live. We see here that it opened up into, it just opened up my scriptures mapped in Chrome. Okay, let's go over here. Okay, now that we've done that, we can create a new file in our Cypress folder, sorry. Oh, excuse me. We want to do it in integration. And we can just name this project3.spec.js. So what this is this is just the name of the file that we're going to run. We should be more specific with it, but for this example, I'm just going to use project3. So yeah, now we can start writing some of the tests that we want to do on this. So I'll show a few tests, and then I'll copy a bunch in, and then show you how they can all work and how you can kind of go through the GUI that they've created for this. So when you're writing tests in Cypress, it starts out with describe, and what describe is basically saying is here's just like a whole group of different tests that we're going to do, and here's kind of like what they're doing. So I'm just going to close basic testing. So it takes basic testing, and then you give it a closure, which will have each of the tests actually in it. So now what we're saying is we use it, the keyword it, and we say for this first one, I just want to make sure that when it visits, that like going to my scriptures mapped page actually works. So we're going to say visits my scriptures mapped, and we give it a closure. So we're describing what this group of testing should be doing, and this specific test should visit my scriptures mapped. So similar to jQuery, the way that you can access Cypress functions is you can just use sci. So in jQuery you use your $, in Cypress you're using sci. And they have a whole bunch of different functions that are listed out oh, excuse me, I forgot a comma right here. They have a whole bunch of different functions listed out on their docs. I'm just going to show a few here, but their docs are really great with showing you how you can do things. So we're going to do sci.visit, and this is going to go to our root, which we said earlier was localhost 5500. Because I'm running my website on that port, everything should work out. Now what I can do is I can say sci.get. Now get can accept a whole bunch of different things in order to get an element on a page. Here I really like using the CSS selectors, and so you can just use, this is just how mine is configured. I want to make sure that I'm getting the title that's in the center head, which is where there's an actual title, and we say should contain the scriptures mapped. So here what I'm saying, so here's some just basic testing. What this should return is that it visits scriptures mapped. The way that I'm making sure that that's happening is I'm getting the title and I'm saying, hey, does this title contain this string, the scriptures mapped? So let's just save that. And now what we should be able to do is we can bring this up. Let's go ahead and open this up. So we can see that when we actually run the test from Cypress, we see that we get this, we can run it, we can stop it here as well, but it pulls up a window of Chrome, and it pulls up my website, and it also pulls up just the steps for what's going on here. So it's visiting the root, it's calling the XHR, so the HTTP requests, it's going and getting that CSS selector, and then expecting that to contain the string that I passed into it. And because it is true that that it does contain that, I get a little check saying that this one passed. So let's try doing another test. So let's say it should go to Genesis. So we're going to give it a closure, and in this we're going to say sci.get, so we're using our CSS selectors again, and now we're going to click on it. So what's great about this, which you can't do with other, like with just normal functions in JavaScript, is you're actually simulating a click on the page. So now I'm making sure that when it goes and it gets that link, because this should link to, or this selector will grab the link that for Genesis. Now I'm going to click on it. So the way that I'm going to test, make sure that I'm actually going to Genesis, is I'm going to look at the breadcrumb and say what's in the breadcrumb. This is one way that you could do it. So I'm going to get my crumb, my breadcrumb, and I want to know, does it contain Genesis? Does it contain OT? So what's great about Cypress is I can do both of these should statements, and it will run both of them separately even though they're chained, and it will tell me if they're both true or not. So now one other thing that I can also test is I can test the location. So this is very similar to when we're using location just with JavaScript, where it's just the URL pretty much. So now what I'm saying here is that I'm expecting my loop href to include the hash that we would expect for when we're going to Genesis in the URL. So these are two different ways that you could look at. Here's something that's literally on the page that I can find using Cypress to assert that the breadcrumb does contain Genesis and does contain OT. Now I think about those should be flipped around, but it's okay. And then I'm going to check the location and make sure that the location is what I expect as well. So I'm going to save that. Let's go ahead and open this up, and it automatically went through it already. So if I press refresh up here, it does it so fast that, and you can see over here actually that it actually is in the Genesis page. But you can see it visited it, came here, it went, I guess because of the fade and everything, you can't see everything. It went and actually got the link, clicked on it, went to a new URL, which is what we expect. Now I'm checking the crumb to make sure that Genesis and OT are both in it. Now I'm checking the location to make sure that it is the location that I'm expecting. So let's rerun it one more time. Bam, it's done. And it's loaded that on the page. So it's awesome because it's all automated for what I should be finding. Now really quick, what I want to show, because I don't have too much time left, is here are some tests that I've actually already created. So here's some basic testing that I already did. I wanted to also test transitions. So I wanted to test making sure that when I go from the Old Testament to the New Testament, from the New Testament to the Book of Mormon, and back and forth, making sure that all works. And I also wanted to test rapid clicking on the next or the previous button, because I created some functionality so that if the user clicks on the next or previous button like 5 times right in a row, that it waits until it's finished, everything is finished transitioning before it goes on the next one. So now when we come look at it, you can see that it's doing everything for me. It's testing it all. So if I ever write new code in for any of those things, I don't have to worry about, I can just run this test and I don't have to go and actually do the clicking to make sure that my code still worked. I can just run my tests and see where things work. And you see here now, there's something that went wrong. And so I can come here and actually see, okay, where did it go wrong? And it looks like the crumb didn't work as expected. So now I can say, okay, there's something that I need to go either fix in my test or fix in my code and figure out what's wrong. And so it's great to being able to step through your development and figure out how you can make it better. So Cypress is a great tool, especially if you're trying to use it with test-driven development so that you can be testing your code as you go and so that you can be creating reusable code throughout your app.